a lot of the things that parents and any type of caregiver do to make their day go smoothly is doing a lot for their kiddo. And if you emphasize the sheer importance of taking more time to not provide additional support that isn't needed or set up scenarios where they absolutely have to communicate. And it could be something as small as not opening a snack for them that they need. Daily living skills is a perfect place to try all of that. Getting out the door for school, getting bags packed, getting dinner ready, getting bath time routine and shower routine and everything for the next day. All of that is so filled with opportunities for communication, but also probably the parts of their day that they're trying to get through as smoothly and quickly, especially if they have other children there. But I think that if you can highlight the importance of sabotaging those routines, because they are routines, they will probably see the biggest changes in communication so quickly with that.
Hey there, and welcome to the Speechie Side Up podcast. My name is Benita Litvak, and I am so grateful you're here. I'm an ASHA certified speech language pathologist, author, and augmentative and alternative communication consultant who is obsessed with helping SLPs like you stop reinventing the wheel and connect with other SLPs in the trenches. Have you ever wondered how other SLPs seem to be doing it all with ease? Well, around here, you'll get to hear firsthand how SLPs are really getting things done while keeping evidence-based practice and self-care in mind. Think of this as a coffee date with your SLP friends. Get ready to be challenged and encouraged while we learn together.
Wow. So we are entering into our 6th year of the podcast, which is insane. It started back in 2018, and we are kicking off this 2024 season with a very special guest, actually one of the OG guests slash host. Everybody, please welcome back Kim Tice. Hi, Kim.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
So if you have been listening from the beginning, then you know exactly who Kim is. But if you have not listened from the beginning, then I would encourage you to go all the way back to episode numero uno, number 1, so you can learn about Kim, learn how he started, and we'll just let Kim give us a little bit of background info, like who she is, what she does, and where she's at now on her SLP journey.
Cool. So yeah, oh my gosh, so great to be back. We had so much fun doing this back in the day. My youngest, Elena, was a baby when we started this, and she was probably just approaching toddlerdom when I stepped away for my kiddos and family. And since then, I feel the world's gotten so crazy, right? Because then we had COVID happen not too long after that. So stepped away to focus on them. And now Elena is actually going to be 6 next month already. So it has been a minute for sure, for sure. I guess over the last couple of years, wow, so many updates on what has happened in my life the last
Bet.
couple of years for sure. And it's interesting because I wound up stepping away from this and continued to be an SLP. And then during COVID, when we had kiddos at home and distance learning and all of that, wound up focusing on writing more and putting SLP to the side and doing therapy just on the side to stay relevant, obviously. And I got into more copywriting and writing for a while just because of the flexibility of that schedule for my kiddos. And then finally, they were able to go back to school. And honestly, I feel this has been the most transformative, probably 5 years of my life. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much has happened. So no easy way to say this one, but my marriage ended, which I'm okay with. That was a really good decision for me and for my children. And that's been an interesting journey. Right around the time that I left too, there was just so much going on with me emotionally at that time. But also, I think this was referenced in some of our old episodes, but I'm adopted and my birth family came back into the picture. And so I was kind of exploring what that was like. I found out I have a brother and a sister, and they all live in Pennsylvania. And we actually now have a great relationship. Last year, I wound up spending our first holiday together, and we all had Thanksgiving together. So that's transformed over these years as well. I mean, I feel like I'm having a dry January, but maybe guys just like buckle up and get a drink for this. But also in the interim of all this happening, while I was living in my apartment with my kiddos, my neighbor had a fire at one point, and I wound up losing everything. And that was just a crazy, crazy, crazy experience. I'm so thankful my kids weren't home at the time that this happened. I had actually just had them 5 days in a row, and I was always talking about running. I'm still an avid runner, had run 16 miles that day. And so, like an old lady, I went to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, and then the fire happened. So that was crazy. But thank God my kids weren't home. But then, if I could turn this around, because I know this is sounding like a huge downer right now, guys, but I'm really okay. You don't have to call for help. Really positive things happened in my life after that. I wound up moving again and actually met my current partner now. And he is so, so, so fantastic. I actually knew him for years. He was a neighbor. We were friends, and workout friends would run past each other, and then eventually worked out together and all of that. And when the fire happened, him and his kids came to visit my children and I, because they would hang out together sometimes, and brought us some housewarming gifts, and wound up like he would come over. And I joked about it at the time that, like, oh, this is the easiest move ever because I have nothing to move. I've lost everything. But in reality, it was a ton of work because I had to rebuild all the furniture, and all the furniture you order these days is just like build it yourself. And so he would come over and help build the furniture, and we just wound up spending all this time together. And now we just live this life with his 2 kids and my 2 kids, and we have a dog and a cat. And like, he's the most supportive person. So I've since dove back into a bunch of all things SLP because that's obviously my passion. Currently, right now, I'm doing virtual services during the day in Virginia schools, actually, mostly servicing ASD students, but middle school also have some literacy, some artic in there, a little bit of stuttering, AAC, of course. And that's been interesting. We can dive into that a little later about virtual therapy services and the difference. And I also work because I need that in-person piece, right, at a cute, adorable 1 mile away from my house clinic in Boynton Beach. And that's fantastic because I get my one-on-one therapy there. And it's just a great setting and super supportive team over there. I work there a couple hours a week as well with a few clients. And I think that's about it. That's where we are today. So I'm back into doing all things SLP, super passionate. I have a great person who supports me all the time in that. And I'm doing really great, guys. So
Yeah, you really are. Like, I've watched you transform over the past 5 years. And we were saying this the other night because we've been talking a lot before this episode about how it was meant to happen this way. It couldn't have happened any other way. Speechy Side Up was growing so fast. You were at a place in your life where you didn't have a supportive partner. You had very little babies around, and it just became really difficult for the brand to grow. But then also, you did something really special. You went and got certified in copywriting. And lo and behold, right now, we really needed a copywriter for Tassel. So if anybody listening to this is not familiar with Tassel, Tassel is the network that provides ASHA CEUs for the Speechy Side Up pod courses. And we're going to have more podcast shows soon added to the network. So stay tuned for that. But we need a copywriter. I've been doing all the copywriting. Copywriting is, well, can you explain what copywriting is?
sure. So copywriting, and the first time I ever heard the term, I didn't realize that at first that it wasn't copywriting, copy RIGHT, right? Like that. We're talking about copy WRITE, which is writing to persuade, which is all writing, right? But almost every piece of text that passes through is copywriting to some extent on the internet, right? Because you're writing to persuade or inform or entertain or something of that nature. And that covers so much in marketing. And that's what wound up happening. I wound up working for a marketing agency because it can be difficult to write for content and make a living off of that. And so copywriting, it's much easier to do that. And that's why I segued into that while my kids were home during COVID. But this is such a fantastic pairing because I wound up getting my feet wet and diving into all things copywriting with this marketing agency. I wound up doing administration work for them and everything like that. But in marketing, things are very niche usually. It's not common to have a marketing agency that services all different things. And this specific niche was the green industry, not like environment, like lawn care and landscaping, which writing about mulch and grass is not the most exciting thing you can do. And it's certainly not something I am passionate about by any means. But you really do have to dive into it for email campaigns and social media posts and website content and blogs that are driven to promote search engine optimization, SEO, right? So that's just some of the things that copywriting dives into.
I'm giggling because I'm like, if you can write about grass, you can definitely write about speech. So I'm so excited. She hasn't officially started with the copywriting yet. That's coming soon, but she already gave us some ideas for an upcoming event we're having, and they're so good already. So it's going to be really good, guys. Going further back than the podcast, Kim and I did a book series together. So Kim is an excellent writer. She always has been. That's her passion. So it's just full circle moment now. Um,
Yeah,
Very cool to have her back and be on the team. And Kim has, well, I just want to make sure people here are aware. I'm not trying to skip over all of the personal stories that Kim has.
oh,
Kim and I have had a relationship throughout this process where she's been keeping me abreast with everything. So we've gone through the emotions and motions together throughout all of those experiences. She was just giving you the quick rundown of what's happened in the last 5 years. So not to glaze over any of that at all.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Kim and I were like talking previously before this interview, and she had a story from her clinic experience today. And we thought it would be a really good topic to talk about tonight, which is basically like inspiring AAC team collaboration or getting caregiver support for AAC implementation. So I'll let Kim share her story, and then we'll talk about some ideas, maybe 5 tips that you can use to inspire caregivers to support the AAC system.
For sure. So I just found this really, really funny. Just the irony, I guess, of this. But I had a new kiddo starting at the clinic today. Super, super adorable little 5-year-old boy. And he's ASD. And so I was told by my boss before the session, and I read through the paperwork, also some messages from mom, that he is going to be very, very non-compliant when it comes to AAC, that he just wants nothing to do with it, is not interested at all. Just this is going to be such a struggle, was the way it was supposed to be. Mom comes in and right off the bat, she kind of tells me that too. And I do want to point out here that she came in and so right away I'm wanting to greet him. And before we even get in the door of the clinic, we're leaving the waiting room and I'm, oh, where's our device? And she says, this is a common caregiver error. Oh, it's packed in my backpack. And so she had to kind of go through a backpack and go through a bag to go ahead and get it. And I think that that's something really, really big to touch on with caregivers is just accessibility. We have to have accessibility to the system, whatever it is, whether it's a dynamic system or a static system, it doesn't matter. We have to have accessibility to that. But at any rate, she proceeds to tell me this is going to be such an uphill struggle. And I kind of briefly spoke to her that that's why I want all my AAC clients for the parent to sit in on the session so they can have the training and also mimic the things that I do. That's really important, right? Because I think telling someone something versus having them see it in action is two very different things, right? And the point is, this was a half an hour session. And I want to say that he independently used core symbols on this device 3 different times, but with prompting probably about 15, maybe. Definitely 15, could have been more a little bit, to be honest. And when I'm saying prompting, I'm not talking about maximum support, hand over hand, which is what I was kind of expecting. I'm talking about me gesturing to the device or me just sliding it towards him a little bit. So this was not by any means maximum assistance. And it just got me thinking about how I found this really funny and ironic that AAC is this specific branch of speech where I feel like for most cases when we're doing an evaluation, we can trust that the parent's a reliable informant, right? If it's feeding therapy and they come in and they tell you that their child only eats chicken nuggets and crackers, that's probably accurate information. And I don't think, just to be so clear, because I'm a parent myself and everybody makes mistakes, you're a parent, right? Everybody makes mistakes. I'm not at all coming for this mom, nor am I critiquing her. I'm more commenting on the fact that in her mind, she 1,000% felt very confident in saying that her child is not an AAC user, is not going to be proficient at it, and that this is going to be a struggle because he's so against it. And that just was not the case. And I don't think she was wrong. I just think she was misinformed.
It makes me wonder if we're asking the wrong question.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. That was exactly where my train of thought was going was, okay, well, first of all, if if that's the case, and the theory is that when it comes to AAC, is the parent really a reliable informant? And that's what made me think, well, are we asking the right questions, or is it just that they are reliable, but they don't know what we're looking for, you
Yeah,
know?
because it's almost like asking them if they are proficient in a technique.
Hmm.
Like, if you bring it to childhood apraxia speech, it would be like, is your child a Kaufman speech card user? Kind
Yes.
of, right? Or let's think about feeding or any of those other specialties. So I'm wondering what other kind of questions we could be asking parents versus is your child using AAC to communicate? It's more about what are you doing? The interview should more be on the parent, like, are you modeling the AAC system? Were you involved in selecting the AAC system? How much training have you received on the AAC system? Right? It should be more geared towards the parent, I think, versus the client and how much they're using it and how much prompting they need. That's all client based versus being caregiver based.
Absolutely. This is not the first client I've seen where they have some pretty decent AAC skills, and you can tell that the perception is that they do not have AAC skills. And that makes me think that parents or caregivers at times think that if they put this device in front of this child and that child does not automatically become Stephen Hawking and start generating long paragraphs on this device, that they are not proficient. So right off the bat, I brought up to her, I think I got this statistic from Gail Tate Van Tatenhove, but I'm not sure. And it could be different now because I'm referencing it from years ago. But just the idea that a toddler hears 18,000 words a day, and then we go and we take these devices and we just stick them in front of the kiddos without modeling themselves. That is really just such powerful information. When I mentioned that to the mom, you could tell that that made an impact for her.
I think it's Jane Corsten. The
Oh, maybe. Yes. I'm getting all my AAC people jumbled in my head.
well, I'm sure Gail talks about it because I feel like a lot
Mhm.
of AAC specialists or experts or whatnot or advocates quote that, but pretty sure that's Jane Corson. And it's such a good quote. It's so true. I like the other one that they use, which is like playing a piano, sticking a piano in front of somebody and expecting them to play it. That's kind of what we're doing with the AAC system if we expect them to be able to pick it up and use it right away.
Yeah. Going down that line of thought, it also made me wonder about who else might not be a reliable informant. And not to say that they're unintelligent or, but maybe just not as, if you're not versed in AAC, it's easy to make a mistake. And I recently came across someone at the clinic who got denied for an AAC trial, or it was turned down. And in the evaluation for it, the cause that they cited was that the child was asked to touch a picture of a bee. I'm not talking about BE, I'm talking about BEE, a picture of a bee. And that was one of their justifications for thinking that that child would not be AAC proficient, which I found to be so bizarre, right? There's a school-based eval. How meaningful was the bee to that child? It wasn't something they could request or anything like that. And why should that be a determining factor? But it did also get me thinking about, even not to date myself, I'm getting on the older end of things. And I can clearly remember my AAC classes in grad school being very much not the same conversations that we have about AAC today, for sure. Definitely the way today we push that, like, there are no prerequisites. That was not the case. For sure in grad school, there were prerequisites, and they presented it as if they don't have this checklist, they're not going to be a proficient AAC user. And so that got me thinking about the clinician with the B. Are they an older clinician? Have they not done a lot of professional development in AAC, or are they just stuck in that kind of like archaic way of thinking where if you don't have X, Y, and Z, this isn't going to be for you? And that's just not the case.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And it's actually very important because I remember when we were doing AAC evaluations in the schools, I was a assistive technology specialist supporting all of the middle schools. Our informant was the classroom staff, primarily the teacher. And were they a reliable informant? Probably not. But I think I had a good enough idea whether that teacher needed support or not, like filling out the paperwork, because I also got to know the student. So I supported them throughout that process. So yeah, it's interesting. I think you can't take that stuff for face value sometimes. You really have to dig in a little bit deeper. That's why they're more comprehensive evaluations or dynamic evaluations than our typical speech and language evals.
Yes, absolutely. I think it can be really tricky for teachers, not to say that maybe then I don't know that like I'm referring to them being a reliable informant or not, but I think that the landscape of their classroom is going to dictate how successful they are with AAC. For example, if they have a lot of students that are at similar levels, then it might be more, I guess, plausible for them to be able to model AAC strategies because everyone's on that level and needs that level of intervention. But depending on the landscape of some special ed classes, you might have kids that are really high and kids that are really low. And somehow in between all of that, they're trying to meet all those needs. And so they don't want to focus on the AAC for the people who don't need it. I just think it's really tricky. And it also depends a whole lot on how much support staff they have to be able to allocate their own time to making an AAC system work and modeling it as much as it needs to be throughout the day.
Yeah, that's where those tiered systems of support come in. Chris Bouguet talks about that in one of our episodes. I think it's how to have a successful school year. So if anybody's interested, definitely go back to that episode. But we're going to talk more about classroom support in the next episode. So let's talk about at least 5 ways that we can help caregivers better support AACUs.
Sure. I think it's super important to remind caregivers that they do not have to have the complete utterance modeled on the device. And that blows people's minds quite a lot, I find. And this mom specifically noted, like, oh, you're speaking and interjecting core words from the device into your sentence, but the whole sentence has been generated on the device. So I said, he was playing with the door. And I said, oh, do you want to open? Right. And I spoke to the mom about that, and she said that that was one of her big stumbling blocks, was feeling like she had to get a message out and didn't have the time to sit there and look around on the device herself to form this whole sentence, or sometimes couldn't find a word or close out the little words folder or whatever it was. And so it became really overwhelming for her to speak to him with it. So I think that's an important one, is for them to understand that they can model use of the device without every single word that comes out of their mouth being from the device.
That's such a good reminder. It is funny. It's one of those simple ones. We talked about this before too, before this episode. Like one of those simple things that if you've been doing AAC for a while, you kind of forget that someone who's just starting out, that could be a big roadblock for them or a big barrier for them. So thanks for mentioning that one. Vicky Clark, a couple years ago at ATIA in a panel discussion, had suggested something and it was so helpful. So I definitely want to talk about it here. She said that she started reading self-development books, two specifically, Atomic Habits and Start with Why, because when you are working with other humans and you're trying to get them to do something that they're not typically doing, you're basically trying to influence human behavior. And so looking at these type of books like how to inspire good habits through the book Atomic Habits is really important because you can't make somebody do something. And it's hard enough. Like we're at the beginning of the year, right? We're all trying to establish good habits right now. And look how hard it is for us to establish it for ourselves. Now you're also trying to establish that for somebody else. And yes, you can have administration. We're in a classroom setting. Well, we're talking about caregivers. It has to be intrinsically motivating for that caregiver. So that's where the book Start with Why is really helpful because you're basically helping the caregiver identify why it's important to them for them to use the AAC system and support their child in using the AAC system. So it could be like they want to have their child say, I love you to them with the AAC system. Just get into the nitty gritty about what they would imagine AAC use would do for them and their family, I guess, depending on who that caregiver is, the primary caregiver is. But I thought that was such a good tip. And I read both of those books and have been implementing them ever since when working with caregivers or classroom staff.
I really love that because I feel I'm familiar with one of those books at least. And so I feel that would be really just good for them in general. Those are just great books to read for lots of different purposes and progress in life. So I just feel like that's one of those multifaceted improvements that making that little suggestion could impact them in a big way. So I love that completely. Oh my gosh. Okay. I think actually emphasizing the extreme importance of sabotage is super important as well. And that can be a really tricky one for caregivers, especially depending on what they have in their plate, right? A lot of the things that parents and any type of caregiver do to make their day go smoothly is doing a lot for their kiddo. And if you emphasize the sheer importance of taking more time to not provide additional support that isn't needed or set up scenarios where they absolutely have to communicate. And it could be something as small as not opening a snack for them that they need or not assisting with daily living skills is a perfect place to try all of that. But the problem I can understand as a parent where that gets dicey. And I think we have to be understanding as therapists is that the best place to work on this is daily living skills because they're consistent routines that happen every day. So how fantastic. And the opportunities for core vocabulary, amazing during these things. However, those are probably the most high stress times of the day, right? Getting out the door for school, getting bags packed, getting dinner ready, getting bath time routine and shower routine and everything for the next day. All of that is so filled with opportunities for communication, but also probably the parts of their day that they're trying to get through as smoothly and quickly, especially if they have other children there. But I think that if you can highlight the importance of sabotaging those routines, because they are routines, they will probably see the biggest changes in communication so quickly with that. So if you can get the importance through there, I think the value of that becomes clear rather quickly.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's important for them to know that I don't have to do a worksheet on the side or homework.
Yeah.
This is something that I can do throughout the day, basically. I feel like I'm throwing a lot of tidbits out here, but it's an AAC related app, but I'm throwing a lot of resources out, is what I mean. But this is an AAC episode. And if you have been listening, you know that AAC is my jam. So I have a free resource that is all about using AAC in the home, and you can get it on my website at theslp.com. And I think you just have to go to the freebie section and you can get it there. So what it does is it shows you the core words that you can use during bath time, during dinner time, during getting dressed. So definitely take advantage of that freebie if you need it. Yeah, I think that was a really good suggestion. The other thing that I would also recommend is if the evaluation has not been done yet and you're doing the evaluation, get the family involved in the evaluation. You're going to get such better buy-in if you get them involved in the beginning. Have them look at the different device options or the different AAC system options. Nowadays, if we're talking about apps and there's no access component, if the child is using touch and they can use an app, so many of the apps are so similar nowadays. So it's like comparing a Samsung or an Android and an iPhone. You need the parents or the caregiver to try them out and see which one they feel the best to support or feel most comfortable in supporting. Tiffany from Nigh High Functioning, she came on our AAC Connect panel last year, and she just threw out so much good information. But she was saying that we should really be trialing at least 8 apps, and we should be doing it for a long time. I think she said like 6 months we should be doing a trial. And that blew everybody's mind. But Tiffany is an actual AAC user, and this was her point of view from being an AAC user. And I think that's why it's so important to consult with actual AAC users because AAC is still fairly new. And like you said, when you were in grad school, there were prerequisites. Like we are still getting new research all the time. So it's really important to stay on top of that research, but then also consult with AAC users too.
Makes a lot of sense, though. It really does when you think about it. I mean, it can seem really drawn out for the therapist or the family, but if at the end of that you find the right fit when you're working towards a goal, the time's going to pass anyway. So just something to think of. Oh, something that's my favorite. This is probably more drawn towards just ASD, AAC users, is focusing on, I guess not focusing on as much as don't lose the opportunity to comment or make communication opportunities happen with stimming. Stimming is so soothing and enjoyable to kids with ASD or just even focusing on some of their hyper interests, right? So I think sometimes parents do think what you said. I need to be sitting in a structured task with a worksheet. And that's the only way that I'm going to be working on this skill. Whereas I like to recommend to people, if they like to flick the light on and off, sit there next to them and comment on it for a little while, on, off, on, off. And a lot of times, I've done that with kiddos, and you'll start to get some really nice communicative interactions too. You'll start to get some more eye contact or maybe some giggling and smiling. And I think not only does the kiddo enjoy that, any kid, right? Not ASD, any kid wants to talk about their topics of interest that they enjoy. So why would a child with autism be any different than that? So they are super motivated to flick this light switch on and off 50 times. Engage in that because you're ultimately getting a communicative interaction with your child. And it couldn't be the light switch. Maybe it's the kiddo that wants to sit and spin on the computer chair, or maybe it's a sensory toy that they want to squish a whole lot. And we can find a core word for almost any kind of stim, right? And then what you can do is kind of move from just commenting on what they're doing to maybe providing a little bit of that sabotage that we talked about earlier. So block the light switch. Oh, you want it off? Well, they're probably super, super motivated to continue that pattern of behavior. So let's find a way to help them communicate during, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely going through that right now with my daughter in teaching literacy. And I got a resource off of Teachers Pay Teachers, which is basically all worksheets, and trying to make it as fun as possible and finding that I have to be so much more creative. So she loves princesses. So I put the princess names on a piece of paper and then printed the same one out, cut the different letters out. So now she's like matching the letters and saying the name and the sound. But that one's like so much more motivating for her than the TPT worksheets that I got. So, but it requires you to be a lot more creative. Like as an SLP, I feel like it's so easy, especially as an experienced SLP, to take advantage of those opportunities throughout the day. If we are playing with Play-Doh, I'll put it in balls and we'll talk about the colors and the sound of the color, but it's less easy for my husband to do the same thing. So we are both kind of brainstorming together different ways to incorporate literacy throughout the day. But like all of that to say that I think if you don't know a lot about the topic or how to implement it, your default is we have to sit at the table and this is work versus following your child's lead, following your child's interests. Even if they're not interesting to you, they're not going to learn anything unless there's joy. And John Halloran says that in his LAMP trainings. If your child is not laughing and they are not enjoying the activity, then they are not learning during that activity. So if you're trying to implement AAC during those times where it feels work and it's miserable, then probably need to take a step back and reevaluate how can we incorporate this into activities that are very interesting for my child. So I love your suggestion because that's exactly what I'm going through right now, but just on the literacy front.
Yes. No, it is. It's true across the board with all kiddos for sure. And even though I think that for parents and SLPs alike, right, that can almost feel like cheating or like you're doing the wrong thing if you just do the same thing 10 times over with them. But I think the question to ask yourself is how much communication are you getting from that child with that child driven task versus the thing that you think you should be doing and forcing on them. You're going to spend more time fighting behaviors and battles and less time working on the thing you set out to work on.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like along those lines too, and Alex from Meaningful Speech talks about this, but this comes from OTs. Movement equals language. So I feel I get the best AAC sessions when we're doing something involving movement, whether we're on the playground or a swing. Do you feel like that too?
Yes, I think kids are built to move. And it's really funny because I've had a couple different younger therapists be like, well, I need so and so sitting. And I just don't care. I don't care if you're sitting. I don't care if you're flapping. I don't care if you're moving because I feel like you're made to move. And if I'm getting language and communication from you during that, then I don't care. But I think all movement, especially movement activities, is so much more fun for kiddos. Like I can remember being with Luke, who's now oh my God, 9 years old. But I remember doing that early literacy stuff that you're talking about doing with Luke. And I found that he did not want to do flashcards or things of that nature as much. But I, at one point, got a huge poster board and some dollar store tape that looked like a road. And I just taped the road all along this huge poster board that we kept for a while. I wound up getting it laminated, and it was so big, it cost me, I want to say, like $17 to get laminated, just so you can understand the size of that, because SLPs know their lamination, right? And the point is, before I got it laminated, I then put letters all over the board. And so he wound up just loving this movement game where he had to kind of crawl along that whole big poster board and push cars to the different letters, or these two cars are having a race to the S, and this car, which car is going to get to T first, and but anything movement, and you're just moving his body along that big board, and so much more motivating than flashcards, obviously.
I wouldn't like that because she isn't into cars, but like Princess is, you have to make it so individualized to your kid, to your client. Like the standard cookie cutter box set stuff just doesn't work for most kids, especially the young ones.
For sure, for sure. But I do think whole body movement too, that gross motor outdoors really is so useful and stimulating.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I
Mhm.
feel like that was 5. I'm sure we could do so many more. We'll cap it at that, and then the next episode is gonna be about supporting classroom staff in AAC implementation. So, Kim, anything else you wanna add before we wrap up today?
No, I'm so happy to be back, and I'm glad we got to have this chat.
Well, if you get a newsletter from Speechy Side Up, it's probably Kim, and if it sounds way better than my old newsletters, it's definitely Kim. Kim, thank you so much for coming back on, and look forward to having you on more in the future and having you behind the scenes in copywriting too. So thank you again for coming on and sharing your story with everybody.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for listening. By the way, have you joined the SSU crew yet? By joining, you get access to the free goods section on our website, plus podcast updates, special event notifications, and therapy inspiration. You can sign up at bit.ly/join SSU crew, all lowercase, or just find the link in this episode description. Also, don't forget to take a screenshot of this episode so that you can always refer back to it, and share it on social media if you really love the topic. Take care, and remember to always fill your speechy side cup first before you can pour into others.